Thank you for that nice introduction. So I'm a national security reporter and editor. It's what I've been doing for the past 25 years. But I'm also a child of the 1980s, and I grew up watching movies, dystopian. Oh, closer? Is this close enough? I always feel like I'm too close. So I grew up in the 1980s watching dystopian films like The Terminator, and I always thought that the real battles over AI would come down to sort of sentient computers trying to launch a nuclear war, killer robots. But when we look at the battle that's emerged over AI and weapons over the past month, it feels in some cases like a little bit of a comedy skit, like something from the series Silicon Valley. On one side, we've got sort of strange Lovian Pentagon officials saying that we want to be able to use AI however we want. And on the other side, we have a conscience-stricken AI company that says that they want to have safeguards and that they're trying to negotiate with something that literally calls itself now the Department of War. So what's happening? As many of you probably heard, the Pentagon pressed the AI company Anthropic to lift all restrictions on its AI model Claude and how it's used by the military. So Anthropic basically had two restrictions. The first was they didn't want their LLM, their models, being used for mass surveillance of Americans. Seemed pretty straightforward. And the second one was they didn't want their AI being used for fully autonomous weapons, meaning they didn't want AI to be the actual decision maker on picking and executing a target without human oversight. When the two sides failed to reach an agreement, the Pentagon's Secretary of War said not only that would they stop using Claude, Anthropic's model, but they would also label the entire company a supply chain risk, which would jeopardize its commercial business, not just its military business. And I think, as many people have said, this is clearly a precedent-setting clash that may determine whether private companies or the government ultimately write the rules for AI. But what I want to talk about is, why are we even having this conflict? What emerged historically that didn't happen in the past that we're actually having this conversation? So this actually goes back to World War II. In World War II, the US government controlled the military technology. We had the Manhattan Project to build nuclear weapons. The military had arsenals that were government owned, thank you, that produced munitions. And we had government laboratories that did the underlying science and technology for weapons. After the war, a lot of that infrastructure was privatized, not all of it, but the government remained the primary funder of science and technology in the United States, thinking that funding science and technology would help for national defense. So by 1964, over 3/4 of all research and development in the United States, not just military technology, not just weapons, but all research and development, was funded by the federal government. And industry was a much, much smaller share of that. But if you fast forward 50 years, those percentages have now flipped. Private business now funds over 3/4 of research and development in the country, and the federal government is only about 1/5. So what does that mean? What it means today is that private companies and not the government are the primary funders of modern technologies like AI, which are badly wanted by the Pentagon and the military. And that shift from basically the military funding and in many cases controlling and owning fundamental technology developments to the private sector is what led us to this point where we are now, where companies say, we developed this technology, we own it, and we might want to have safeguards on it. So let's look at the players. We have Anthropic, an AI company that was founded in 2021 with an explicit statement saying they wanted to develop responsible and safe AI systems. The leadership of the company has repeatedly argued that frontier AI can be extraordinarily powerful, comparing it even to nuclear weapons. And it felt it had a responsibility as a company, as a leader in AI, to work with the Pentagon to help the military to try to protect democratic institutions. So in 2024, Anthropic partnered with a company called Palantir, who has been around for over 20 years and was one of the first then Silicon Valley tech companies to say, we're going to work with the military, we're going to work with the CIA. And it seemed like a good partnership. You had one company with 20 years of experience working with the military, with the software and enterprise infrastructure, and then you had Anthropic that had AI models, and Palantir could help them work in a classified setting in government. But the partnership also had some deeper divisions in it, which came to light after the U.S. mission that captured Venezuela's president and brought him back to the United States to face charges. Anthropic reportedly asked its partner Palantir, they wanted to know how their AI models were used and whether it violated any of their restrictions. Palantir reported these concerns up to the Pentagon, which led to sort of the current conflict that we've had over the past month. And suddenly what looked like a good partnership between Palantir and Anthropic began to reveal a more fundamental dispute about whether private companies or the government should be able to set the guardrails on AI. So the fight between the Pentagon and Anthropic is really about two different realities. First, the contention that private companies now build some of the most powerful technologies, and second, that those technologies have enormous national security implications. Traditionally, private companies that develop and own their own technology can set what are called the terms of use. They can set requirements and restrictions on how it's used. But the Pentagon is arguing that allowing them to set those rules could pose a fundamental threat to national security. The Pentagon's position has economic implications. So if the Pentagon comes in, as it's actually done in this case, and start to restrict what private companies do, it can potentially undermine the very business model of AI companies that the US would like to see succeed. But Anthropic's position has had some problems too. If you're really going to argue that AI is the equivalent of nuclear weapons, then it raises the question of who should be setting the guardrails. Should it be a private company that owns the technology, or it should be at a government? Nuclear weapons, that technology is strictly controlled by the government. And these two positions, I would say, are not easily resolved. But however the outcome, whatever comes of the outcome, it's going to govern artificial intelligence for the years to come. But what happens out of that will also tell us something fundamental about the future of technological power, not just AI. As we see that the private sector is more and more funding our underlying science and technology, research and development in the country, they will have control of a lot of the technology, they will own it, and we're going to see more fights like this. And I think the battle between companies and the government over fundamental technologies, not just AI, that battle is just beginning. Thank you.